Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and happy Rosh Chodesh. That's right. So this Shabbat, which the Parsha is Re, is also at the same day as Rosh Chodesh for Elul. So Re is an interesting portion. We'll get to that in a couple of minutes. But we also are technically, in a way, and some people feel this way, that the month of Elul actually starts the high holiday season. Why? Because from the first day of Elul, in the morning service, every morning service, we recite Psalm 27. That reminds me, I got to put that on the schedule. That's right. Psalm 27, which is the psalm for the penitential season. And during the weekday anyway, when we're done with the service, and some people have an opinion as to when we do this, we blow the shofar. So we're starting to wake up our souls to prepare for the days of awe. Rosh Hashanah, the 10 days of awe, and then Yom Kippur, and then the celebration that is Thanksgiving, that is Sukkot, and the celebration that we have individually with Hashem, which is Shemini Atzeret, and then the celebration we have when we finish reading the Torah and we roll it back. And here outside of Israel, we call that Simchat Torah. In Israel, Shemini Atzeret and Simchat Torah are basically the same day. Also, interestingly enough, and we'll get to this later on, but Rosh Hashanah is actually 2 days in Israel as well. So, interesting. Okay, so Parsha Re means now I say, or now you say, as Moses continues his second discourse with the children of Israel, the new generation that is about to conquer and settle the land. So there's some things that they need to know, and some things that need to be emphasized, like get rid of all the pagan altars, get rid of their Ashtaroth trees, and this is, they talk about Ashtaroth trees in the Talmud a lot, and this is a tree that's used, to worship. Ashtaroth some people think comes from, I think it's the Babylonian or Mesopotamian goddess Ashtaroth, who might have been a goddess of fertility, kind of like the Greek or Roman, I want to say Helena, I'm not sure. But they want them out of the way, completely out of the way. We don't want any trace of them because Hebrews and Israelites, being what we are, we might get tempted to check it out. And then who knows, we may like what we see and we might start to think, oh, it's no harm, it's okay. This portion actually gets very bold in telling people that if anybody tries to entice you, even if they're an Israelite, even if they're a community, get rid of them. So that's in the portion. So that's kind of how the Parsha starts. But as has been our want, has been our tradition, the way we've been doing things, I like to focus on the triennial portion of each Parsha. And that way each year we kind of keep it a little fresh, but we're also appropriate to what we're going to be reading and talking about for our Torah portion. So what this triennial portion focuses on, the end of the Parsha, is two interesting things. The rites of mourning, and we're back to Kashrut. So there are certain commandments, certain mitzvot that you find repeated in Deuteronomy. Some are not, some are. And again, the ones that are repeated in Deuteronomy are very specific to the new generation that's going to be taken on the new land. So first of all, the rites of mourning. Don't make any gashes for mourning. Don't do anything to hurt your body. Okay, so some people say, well, this is why Jews don't get tattooed. And that's the very strict interpretation. You don't make a gash. And that's also building a fence around the Torah, because some liberal, progressive Jews say, I just want to get body art. I just want to get a tattoo. I'm not doing it because it's not like somebody died. Now I'm going to get their face tattooed on my arm, or, mother or whatever it was, or dad or whoever. I just like body art. I just think it's cool to put a picture of something on my skin. Okay. Now, some Jews accept this because the Torah says, don't make a gash, don't do anything in your body because of mourning. And they said, well, I'm not mourning. That's the strict interpretation. That's also a very liberal way to say it, because the strict Jews say, well, don't do it, because basically what's going to happen is it's going to lead you down a path. You might ultimately say, well, it's just a picture of my mother. Oh, how's your mother doing? Well, she's not doing at all because she died last year. Okay, so now you've basically made a gash for someone who's died, who's gone, who's died. Now, what if you do it when that person is alive? Or what if you put the name of your wife, or, women are getting tattoos. What if you put the name of your husband or your brother or your father or somebody, and that person dies? Does that mean now that you've made a gash in your skin for mourning? Because every time you look at your arm, you're going to think, oh my gosh, that person left. See, that's the problem. Very similar to the laws of Kashrut, which follow right after mourning. Now think about it. Isn't it interesting that the rites of mourning are talked about, and then we go right into the idea of Kashrut? So there's a little bit of a connection there. We'll discuss that. But first, there was one of the Tanaim of the Talmud. A Tanaim is one of the rabbis that actually initiated a discussion. And then you have the Amoraim, which are the rabbis that later on added their 2 cents into the discussion. Okay? So Rabban Gamliel allowed his students, his disciples, to eat chicken and dairy. Why? Because chicken do not wean their young, do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. Well, chickens don't produce milk. Chickens don't wean their young. There's no way that you can roast, a chicken in the mother's milk, because there is none. So there it is. And he interpreted it literally. And other rabbis came along and say, no, we got to put a fence around the Torah, because if they think birds, maybe they'll think something else, and all of a sudden we've got a problem. So that's kind of how that went. So back to this idea of mourning rites, okay, and the idea of being liberal or following things as they should. So we also have the laws of Kashrut, because the Israelites are going to be settling the land. A lot of them are going to be herding cattle or flocks, and they need to know, when to eat meat and when not to eat meat. Now, the Hebrew diet is basically a vegetarian diet. It is. If you look in the Torah, God said, that when you have sacrifices, when you do offerings, you're going to do them in one place and one place only. And that's one of the reasons we're getting rid of all the altars of the pagans, in case, we're tempted to use those altars. Because what that may lead to is different cults, different offshoots. Well, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to do it that way. And this way, that it's the domain of the priests. The priests are the one that study the laws, and they do it right. Maybe your shechita, the way you kosher an animal, or mashiach an animal, is not proper. See? So that way, leave it to the experts, people that know what they're doing. Now, God also says that until we establish that, you can eat meat whenever you want. Most people didn't. They maintained a plant-based diet. When you're talking about preparing an animal, I know that some people are very good at preparing chickens, for example. They know how to kill it humanely. They know how to remove all the things of a body that you're not supposed to eat. And I mean, the directions are they're in the Torah, they're in the Talmud. And the same thing with an animal. How preparing an animal. It's work. It's a lot of work to do that. So also, the flocks were kept for other reasons too. The wool, to be used as clothes, for example. Also, they're used as offerings. There's kind of a spirituality, kind of a holiness to the offerings, or at least it was back then. So this is why we don't have all those altars, and this is why Hashem said, get rid of the altars. And maybe the connection between the rites of mourning and the kashrut is because we want to avoid the pagan practices. Some people say that the idea of cooking a kid in its mother's milk, back with the pagans, it was a delicacy, but it was also kind of a power, Why do we drain the blood? The blood is life. Big thing. Okay, we want to make sure all that blood is drained from the animal. That's why we do the salt, to absorb the blood. A lot of pagans would drink the blood. They thought that would give them power, for when they go off to war, etc., etc. And we say, no, blood is the life. You respect the animal. Hence the reads for kashrut. Okay, so thank you for listening again. We will see you next week. Services will be at 9:30 because it's a new month. There's going to be some extra things. We're going to start at 9:30. I know there's been a discussion as to when we're going to hold services. Are we going to stay at 10? We're going to do 9:30. We're going to meet. We're going to see. Let us know how you feel, okay? So, Shabbat Shalom. See you next week. Thank you for listening.